Welcome to Lady Mythos. In most Norse stories, when the gods kill a giant, that is the end of it. The giant loses, the gods move on, and the world keeps turning. But there was one giant whose death did not end anything. It began everything. His name was Thjazi, and when the gods burned him at the walls of their shining city, they thought they were closing a chapter. They were wrong. High in the mountains, where the snow never melts and the wolves never stop singing, Thjazi had a daughter, and she was already coming down. Her name was Skadi. In the old tongue, that name means harm, damage, ruin. Sit with that for a moment. A goddess whose very name is the wound she leaves behind. She put on her father's armour. She took up every weapon she owned, and she walked, alone, to the home of the gods, to make them pay for what they had done. And here is the strange thing, the thing that has puzzled people for 800 years. She came to that hall to kill. She left it, married and laughing, with her father's eyes shining as two new stars over her head. That is the mystery I want us to hold on to tonight. How does a war of vengeance end in a wedding? And underneath that, the darker question: did Skadi ever truly get her revenge? Or did the gods simply buy her off with a husband and a laugh? Keep that question close, because the answer is not where you think it is. If you are new here, come and sit with us a while. Subscribe, settle in, and stay to the end, because this story has a twist that most tellings quietly leave out. And tell me something in the comments while you are here. Are you listening from somewhere with mountains? Or somewhere with the sea? I have a feeling this one lands differently depending on which. You will understand why soon enough. Because this is not really a story about a monster, or even only about revenge, though it has plenty of both. It is a story about two worlds that could never share a bed. The high, cold places, and the warm, bright shore. The wild and the tame. The outsider and the insider. And the woman caught between them, who would not, in the end, give up either her grief or her freedom in order to belong. Keep that tension in mind. It is the engine of everything that follows. But to meet the woman at the gates, we have to climb up to where she began, to a world of ice and silence, long before grief ever found her. So let us go there first. Chapter 1. The Woman Who Hunts the Snow. Long before she was anyone's bride, long before the gods knew her name, Skadi belonged to the mountains. Picture the top of the world in the Norse imagination. Black peaks above a sea of cloud, air so cold it feels like glass in the lungs, and snow that has never once, in all of memory, melted. This was Jotunheim, the land of the giants. The wild country that sat outside the tidy walls of the gods. And Skadi was its huntress. She moved across the high snowfields on skis, a bow in her hand, faster than anything that ran on 4 legs. The Norse had a special name for her. They called her the snowshoe goddess, the lady of skis. Think about what that tells you. Most gods and goddesses are named for the sun, for love, for the harvest, the warm and generous things. Skadi is named for the equipment you need to survive a place that wants you dead. She is winter itself, given a face and the will. There is an even older name for her that I love. The Norse sometimes called her the ski lady, or even the ski god, using a word that does not bother to soften her into something gentle. She hunted game across the frozen heights with a bow, bringing down whatever moved on those white slopes, and she needed no one's help to do it. Every image we have of her is an image of self-reliance, a woman alone against the cold and winning. Her home was a hall called Thrymheim. The name means noise world, and it earned it. This was no cozy lodge. It sat on the highest crags, and it was filled, day and night, with sound. The boom of shifting ice, the shriek of wind through stone, and above all, the howling of wolves. To you and me, that is the soundtrack of a nightmare. To Skadi, it was a lullaby. She slept best when the wolves were loud. And here is a detail most people never hear. That grim mountain hall was not counted among the haunts of monsters. In the old poems that list the sacred dwellings of the gods, Thrymheim sits right there among them, a holy place. And Skadi herself is given a curious title in those verses: the shining bride of the gods. Hold that phrase in your mind, shining bride. We will come back to it, and when we do, it will not mean what you assume, because for now, there was no bride and no wedding. There was only a woman and her mountain. Self-sufficient, answerable to no one, needing nothing the warm world had to offer. If you have ever wanted to walk away from everything and everyone and live somewhere clean and hard and quiet, some part of you already understands Skadi. But she was not entirely alone up there. One other person shared that hall of noise and snow, one person she loved. And what the gods did to him is the reason this entire story exists. The reason a huntress would ever come down from her mountain to stand at their door with a drawn bow. To understand her rage, you have to meet him first. Chapter 2. The apples the giants could not have. Her father was the giant Thjazi, and Thjazi was not some brute swinging a club. He was cunning, powerful, and patient, and he wanted the one thing that could tip the ancient balance between gods and giants forever. He wanted the apples. In Asgard, the home of the gods, there was a goddess named Idun. Her job was small and quiet, and absolutely everything. She kept a wooden box, and in that box were apples. Golden apples that no one else could grow. Whenever a god felt age creeping into their bones, they came to Idun, and she gave them a bite, and the years fell away. That is the secret the Norse gods never advertise. They are not naturally immortal. Their youth is borrowed, one apple at a time, and Idun holds the entire supply. Now imagine you are a giant, and you have just worked that out. The gods are only young because of one goddess and a box of fruit. take the goddess, and you do not have to fight the gods at all. You simply wait. That was Thjazi's plan, and it was brilliant. And this is the thing the myths quietly admit if you listen. The line between gods and giants was never as clean as the gods pretended. They were kin, tangled together by blood and marriage, going all the way back to the beginning. The giants were not simply evil. They were the older, wilder side of the same family, forever locked out of the feast. Thjazi was not stealing from strangers. He was taking back leverage from relatives who had shut his people out. Remember that, because his daughter is about to walk straight into that same feast and refuse to be turned away. But he needed a way in. And for that, he used the one god who was never quite on anyone's side. Loki, the trickster. Half god, half giant, loyal mostly to his own amusement. Thjazi caught him, frightened him, and made him a deal he could not refuse. Lure Eden outside the walls, into the forest, alone. Loki did exactly that. He told her he had found apples even finer than her own, just beyond the trees. She believed him. She stepped outside. And Thjazi, in the shape of a vast eagle, swept down and carried her off into the sky. There is an old poem about this. One of the oldest fragments we have. Older than most of the stories in this video. And in it, the poet does not even give Skadi a name. He only gestures at her, calls her the ski goddess, Thjazi's daughter, waiting somewhere off in the mountains while her father plays his dangerous game. She is a shadow at the edge of her own family's story. Not for much longer. Back in Asgard, the effect of losing Eden was immediate and horrifying. The apples were gone. And so, one morning, the gods woke and found grey in their hair. Their hands trembled, their backs bent. The mightiest beings in the cosmos were becoming old men and old women, right there in their golden halls. And every day that passed made it worse. Thjazi's plan was working perfectly. All the giants had to do was sit back and let time finish the job. The gods gathered, aged and frightened. And they did what they always do when disaster strikes. They looked for someone to blame. And the trail led straight to the one who had walked Eden out the gate. So they seized Loki, the very god who had betrayed them, and they gave him a choice that would flip this whole story on its head. Because the cleverest, most treacherous creature in all the 9 worlds was about to change sides. Chapter 3. Fire on the walls of Asgard. The death of Thjazi. The offer to Loki was simple. Fix this or die. Loki chose to live. They gave him a magical falcon skin, a cloak that let him fly, and he shot north on borrowed wings toward Thjazi's mountains, toward the very hall where Skadi lived. He found Idun there, alone, while Thjazi was away out at sea. Loki worked a quick magic, shrank her down into the shape of a small nut, clutched her tight in his talons, and flew for his life back toward Asgard. And he needed every scrap of that head start, because Thjazi came home, found his prize gone, and knew in an instant who had taken it. He put on his eagle shape again, that huge storm-dark form, and he launched into the sky after Loki. And here you have one of the great chase scenes of Norse myth. A falcon, small and desperate, clutching a nut that is a goddess. Behind it, closing fast, an eagle the size of a storm, wings beating hard enough to bend the trees below. The distance shrinks. Asgard appears on the horizon. It is going to be close. The gods were waiting on the walls, and they had prepared. They had gathered great heaps of wood shavings, piled high along the ramparts. They watched the little falcon strain toward them, with the eagle almost upon it. And the moment Loki cleared the wall, they set the shavings alight. A wall of fire went up, sudden and roaring, exactly where the eagle was flying. Thjazi could not stop. He was moving too fast, too committed, his whole enormous body aimed at the city. He met the flames. His wings failed him, and the great eagle came down inside the walls of Asgard. And there, among his enemies, the giant's story ended. Thjazi, who had very nearly outwitted the gods themselves, was gone. And the gods, who had been old and trembling only days before, felt the years lift away from them. Eden was home. The box of apples was open again. They ate, and their backs straightened, and the grey drained out of their hair, and they laughed in their bright hall, restored, victorious, already half forgetting the giant lying cold at the foot of their wall. That is the cruelty of it. To them, Thjazi was a problem solved. To one person, far away in the snow, he was a father. I want you to leave Asgard for a moment and go back up to the mountain. Because while the gods were celebrating down in their bright city, someone was standing in a cold hall, waiting for a father who was never coming home. Skadi did not see him fall. She only knew that he had gone, and that he had not returned. And then, the way you always somehow know, that he never would. The wolves were still howling. The hall was very quiet. And something in her went quiet too. She did not weep for long. She walked to the wall of that hall where her father's war gear hung. The helmet, the coat of mail, the weapons of a giant. And piece by piece, in the cold, she began to put it on. She fastened the last buckle. She turned, and she faced the door. Chapter 4. She comes armed to the Hall of the Gods. Word reached Asgard that a giant was coming. Not an army, one. A lone figure in full armour walking down out of the north, and the gods knew exactly who she was and exactly why she had come. Now, put yourself in their position. They had just killed her father. By every law they lived by, she held the right of vengeance. Blood for blood. And she came from a line strong enough that her father had nearly aged the gods to death. So the gods did something that tells you a great deal about how frightened they really were. They did not meet her with spears. They met her with an offer. This was the old way of the North, the way real feuds were meant to end. When you killed a man, you could pay for him. Vergild, they called it, the man price. You sat the wronged family down, and you offered them compensation. And if they accepted, the killing stopped there, instead of spiraling on through the generations. So the gods offered Skadi a settlement, not because they were kind, because they were calculating. And a living, satisfied Skadi was far safer to them than a dead father's unavenged daughter. And think about what it means that they even could. The gods do not offer terms to every angry giant who turns up at the gate. Most of those they simply strike down. That they chose to bargain with Skadi, that they treated her as someone who had to be handled with care, honoured, brought inside, hints at something the tidy versions of this story never say out loud. Her family was more powerful and more feared than anyone quite admits. She was not begging at the door. She was negotiating from strength. And she gave them nothing easy to work with. She did not rage or weep or make demands they could simply refuse. She stood there in her father's iron, silent and immovable, and let the sheer weight of what they owed her fill the hall. The gods, for all their power, were the ones who had to find the way out. She had won the first round of this without lifting her bow, simply by refusing to be afraid. So they talked, and the compensation they landed on came in parts, each one stranger than the last. But the first piece of it, the centerpiece, that one was so odd, it almost sounds like a joke made at her expense. They would give her a husband, one of the gods, hers to keep, to bind the two families together and end the feud in the oldest way there is, a marriage. But there was a catch, and it was a cruel one. She could choose any god she liked. She simply had to choose him without ever seeing his face. She would pick her husband from all the gods of Asgard by looking at nothing but their bare feet. Chapter 5. Chosen by the Feet. Skadi's strange marriage. It is one of the most peculiar images in all of myth. A row of gods hidden behind a screen or a hanging cloth, so that only their feet and ankles show beneath it. And a giantess walking slowly down the line, studying feet, choosing the man she will spend her life beside by the shape of his toes. And Skadi, whatever else she was, knew exactly what she wanted. If she had to marry a god, she would marry the best of them. And there was one god everyone agreed was the most beautiful being in all the 9 worlds. Balder, the Shining One, beloved of everything that lived. So Skadi looked down that row of feet for the fairest pair she could find, certain that the loveliest feet must belong to the loveliest god. She saw them, pale, perfect, unblemished. She pointed. "I choose that one," she said. "There can be little that is ugly about Balder." The cloth came down, and the man attached to those beautiful feet was not young, radiant Balder at all. It was Njord, the sea god, older, steady, a god of the coast and the tides and the wealth that comes in on ships. Not the prize she thought she had won. Imagine the silence in that hall. Skadi had reached for the brightest, most beloved god in all creation, and her hand had closed on the quiet grey sea instead. You can almost feel the gods holding their breath, waiting to see whether the Giantess would tear the whole agreement apart over it. She did not. Whatever disappointment moved across her face, she let it pass. A bargain was a bargain. She had chosen, and she would keep her word, even after the world had handed her the wrong god. Why were his feet the fairest? The tellings disagree, and I love that they do. Some simply say she chose wrong, that beauty misled her. But others offer a detail so perfect, it makes me smile every time. That Njord's feet were the cleanest and smoothest of any gods, because he lived by the sea, and the sea washed them, endlessly, day after day, until they were as fair as a young man's. She did not choose Baldur's beauty. She chose the patient work of the ocean, and never knew it. Now, there is something you should understand about Njord, because it matters. Njord was not one of the Aesir, the main tribe of gods. He was a Vanir, from an older, separate family, sent to live among the Aesir long ago as a hostage to seal a peace between the two. A god who had himself once been handed over to end a war. A god whose whole nature was to calm things, to still the wind, to smooth the sea, to make peace between people who should have been enemies. Of all the gods they could have offered a grieving giantess, he may have been the only one who could possibly make it work. Remember that phrase from the mountain, the shining bride of the gods. Here it is, coming true. Skadi, the giant, was about to become exactly that. A bride, bound to the gods. But do not mistake this for surrender. Skadi had not walked into Asgard to be handed a husband and sent quietly home. When she agreed to the marriage, she added a condition of her own. One more task for the gods to perform, and she chose it precisely because she was certain, absolutely certain, that not one of them could ever do it. Chapter 6. The laugh she swore she'd never give. The condition was this: make me laugh. Skadi stood in the hall of the people who had killed her father, wrapped in a grief so heavy it had all but turned her to stone, and she told the gods that the price of true peace was her laughter. She might as well have asked them to bring her father back. She was grieving. She would never laugh again. She was sure of it. The gods tried. One after another, they did their best. Feats, jokes, tricks, whatever they had. And one after another, they failed. Not a flicker. She stood there, grim as the mountain she came from, and the harder they tried, the more impossible it looked. Until, of course, one god stepped forward. The same one who had started all of this. Loki. And what Loki did, I will describe as gently as I can, because it is genuinely one of the strangest things in Norse myth. He fetched a goat. A nanny goat with a good strong beard. He took a length of cord. He tied one end of that cord firmly to the goat's beard, and the other end he tied to himself, to the most tender and delicate part of a man that you can possibly imagine. And then he and the goat began a tug of war. You can picture the rest. The goat pulls one way, bleating and outraged. Loki lurches the other, yelping in a pitch no god should be able to reach. Back and forth, each cry louder than the last, this absurd, undignified, agonizing contest. Until at last, Loki lost his footing and tumbled right into Skadi's lap. And the giantess, who had sworn she would never laugh again, looked down at this ridiculous, groaning trickster sprawled across her knees, and something broke open in her. She laughed. She could not help it. Scholars have argued for a long time about what really happened in that moment, and some read it far darker than a comedy. A few have suggested that Loki was symbolically unmanned by the whole performance, that the trick cost him something he did not get back. Others point out that the old storyteller who recorded it never says any such thing, and that no one, ever after, treats Loki as though he had lost a thing. So we are left with the mystery of the laugh itself. Was it only slapstick? Or was there something deeper in it? A giantess laughing to see a god humbled, brought low, made ridiculous, the way her own father had been brought low. Perhaps both. Perhaps that is exactly why it worked. There is an old pattern in folk tales all across the world, where a suitor must make a grieving or unwilling woman laugh before he is allowed to win her. And that is part of what makes this scene sit so strangely. Loki is not Skadi's suitor. Njord is. Yet it is Loki who does the winning. Loki who breaks her grief open. Loki who pulls that unwilling laugh out of her. Some have wondered whether that is why he later dared to claim there had once been something between them. Whether the laugh, for Loki, felt like a kind of conquest. We will never know. But it is one more thread tying the trickster and the huntress together, and those threads will pull tight before the end. There was one more gift to seal it all. Odin, the chief of the gods, took something he had kept back from Thjazi. The giant's 2 eyes. And he threw them up, high into the night, up past the peaks and into the dark, and there they caught and held and began to burn. 2 new stars. So that Skadi, whenever she looked up from her mountains on a clear winter night, would see her father looking back down at her, shining, set among the lights of heaven by the very gods who had killed him. Grief and gift, tangled together forever. That is Norse myth in a single image. And so it was done. The giantess who came to kill the gods was married and laughing, and her father was a constellation over her head. The feud was settled. Everyone went home content. And that, right there, is where almost every telling of this story likes to stop. A neat, warm, satisfying ending. There is only one problem with it. No one had thought to ask whether the marriage could survive the mourning. Chapter 7. 9 Nights. Why the Winter Goddess refused a god. Here is the trouble with marrying the sea to the mountains. They cannot live in the same house. Njord's home was a place called Noatun, which means the place of ships. It sat on a warm, bright shore where the light came off the water and gulls wheeled overhead and boats rocked gently at their moorings. Skadi's home you already know. Thrymheim, the noise world. Black peaks, howling wolves, snow without end. 2 people, 2 worlds. and they had to choose one. So they did the fair thing. They agreed to share. 9 nights in her home, then 9 nights in his, turn and turn about. They began in the mountains, and it took Njord, the gentle god of the calm coast, almost exactly 9 nights to reach the very end of his patience. When they came back down, he made a little song about it, and it survives to this day, and it is rather funny in its misery. "Weary am I of the mountains," he sang. "I was not long there, only 9 nights. And the howling of the wolves seemed ugly to me after the song of the swans." That was Njord's whole complaint. He missed the swans. He could not sleep for the wolves, that Skadi loved more than any music in the world. Then it was her turn to try his world. 9 nights by the sea, in the bright and the warmth and the endless noise of the shore. And Skadi lasted no better. She made her own answering song. "I could not sleep on the beds of the sea," she said, "for the screaming of the birds. Every morning the gull woke me, coming in off the water." To her, the cheerful cry of a seabird was nails dragged down stone. The place that soothed Njord's soul scraped hers raw. Picture the two of them lying awake in the dark, in each of those homes in turn. Njord in the mountains, rigid under the firs, flinching at every long howl that rolls down off the peaks, aching for the soft slap of water against a hull. Skadi by the sea, staring at a low, bright ceiling, teeth on edge at the gulls, homesick for the clean silence of the snow. 2 people truly trying to love each other's worlds, and simply unable to close their eyes in them. Sometimes love is not the problem. Sometimes it is everything around the love that cannot be reconciled. So Skadi did something that almost no unhappy husband or wife in all of mythology ever does. She left. She did not stay for duty, or for appearances, or because it was expected of her. She put on her skis and she went back up the mountain, back to the wolves and the snow and the silence she loved. And she stayed there. And here is the thing the old sources are careful to tell us. She was still counted a goddess. She lost nothing by leaving. She simply chose herself. This is the heart of the question I asked at the very beginning. Why the Giantess of winter refused to stay married to a god? And I think the honest answer is the simplest one. She would not make herself smaller to fit inside his world. A lot of scholars read this myth as a nature story. Summer and winter, coast and mountain. 2 forces that can meet but never truly merge. And that is true as far as it goes. But underneath it, there is something more human, and I think more painful. Skadi could have had comfort, warmth, a place among the gods, if only she had been willing to stop being herself. And she looked at that bargain, and she said, no. That is where the popular story ends. The mismatched couple, the gentle divorce, the goddess who went home to her mountains. It is a lovely, tidy finish. It is also a lie of omission. Because Skadi's story does not stop there at all. She would marry again. And her second husband was far more powerful and far more dangerous than the sea god she left behind. Chapter 8. The Wolf Rider and the Kingmaker. Some of the old sources tell us that after Skadi left Njord, she did not stay alone for long. She married again, and this time to the highest of them all. Odin, the one-eyed god, the master of Asgard, the ruler of the dead. And from that union, they say, came many sons. One of those sons has a name. Saming. And Saming matters, because from him, the kings of Norway traced their bloodline. Real rulers in the real world claimed that they carried the blood of the giant huntress in their veins. Now, I have to be straight with you, the way the old poems always force me to be, because they do not fully agree. The oldest source names only that one son, Saming, and no more. It is only later that the number swells to many. Somewhere between the poem and the storyteller, Skadi quietly became the mother of a dynasty. There may have been whole traditions about her and Odin that we have simply lost. And she gets tangled in stranger threads still. In one poem, almost in passing, she is called the mother of Freya, Njord's son, which cannot be right by any other telling, where she is at most his stepmother, the wife who came and went. But there it sits, in the old text, a loose end no one ever tied off. And elsewhere, she is named as kin to another giant bride, Gerda, the beautiful giantess who married Freya, as though all these giant women who married into the gods belong to one great, half-hidden family. Here is what I find most striking of all, though. Skadi was not only a character in stories. People actually worshipped her. The old poems say she had temples and fields dedicated to her name. And you can still hear her, faintly, in the map of Scandinavia itself. There are places in Sweden and Norway whose names come from hers, from Skadi's shrine, Skadi's holy place. Villages that carried her name for 1,000 years, without most of the people living in them ever knowing whose name it was. She was real to them. She was worth building a shrine to. And she kept a darker face, too, one that lasted long after the old gods faded. Centuries later, in a saga about a Norwegian king, a man has a nightmare on the eve of a doomed battle. And in that dream, he sees an enormous troll woman riding on the back of a wolf. The wolf's jaws are full, and she is feeding it. Body after body, the fallen of the battle still to come, one after another, into its mouth. And as she does it, she chants that her eagle eyes can already see the king's doom coming for him. The name the dreamer gives that terrible figure on the wolf is Skadi. The huntress of the clean white mountains had another aspect entirely. A rider of wolves, an omen of death. So which is she? The proud divorcee who went home to her skis? The mother of kings at Odin's side? The half-forgotten goddess in a village shrine? The witch on the wolf in a doomed man's dream? She is all of them. She refused to be one simple thing, in life and in story both. And through every one of those lives, across all those centuries, one thing in her never changed, never softened, never let go. Because Skadi never forgot. She never forgot the one who had walked her father to his death, the one who had lured Idun out the gate and boasted about it afterward. The gods had made their peace with Loki, welcomed him back to their feasts, laughed along with his jokes. Skadi was not the forgiving kind. And somewhere down the long years, she was going to collect. Chapter 9. Skadi's Revenge. Cold Counsel for Loki. The reckoning came at a feast. All the gods had gathered in the hall of the sea giant Aegir, drinking at ease, safe among their own. And Loki came in uninvited, carrying a grievance and a cruel tongue, and he began to go around the hall, one god at a time, and take each of them apart. Every secret, every shame, every quiet failing, Loki dragged into the light and laughed. No one was spared. The feast curdled into something poisonous. And then Skadi spoke. She had been listening, this giantess among the gods, and she cut across his mockery with something that was not mockery at all. It was a promise. "Enjoy yourself while you can, Loki," she told him. "You will not be this free for much longer. Soon the gods will bind you to the rock, bound with the cold, hard remains of your own son." She said it flatly, certainly, like someone reading out a sentence that had already been passed. Loki turned his thumb on her, of course. He always did. And he reached for the cruelest thing he could find. "If the gods bind me," he sneered, "then remember that I was first and foremost when they went to kill your father, Thjazi." He said it to wound her. "I helped murder him, and I would do it again." He even threw in a filthier taunt on top, a claim that she had once welcomed him to her bed. It was the sort of thing Loki flung at every goddess in the room that night, true or not, just to watch them flinch. Skadi did not flinch. She let his ugliness wash over her, and then she answered him, in a voice like the wind of her own mountain. "If that is so," she said, "then know this. From my home and from my fields, cold counsel will always come to you." Cold counsel. Remember that phrase, because it may be the quietest, deadliest threat in all of Norse myth. She was not shouting. She was not weeping. She was simply telling him what the rest of his existence was going to feel like. Cold. And she meant to be the one who made it so. And she kept her word. In the end, the gods caught Loki. His crimes had finally run past even what they would tolerate. And they dragged him down into a cave beneath the earth to be bound. They bound him there with cords made from the body of his own son. They laid him across the cold stone, pinned, helpless, going nowhere until the end of the world. And then, someone stepped forward to add the final touch to his punishment. It was not Odin. It was not one of the gods he had insulted. It was Skadi. She took a serpent, a living, venomous snake, and she fixed it to the rock directly above Loki's upturned face, so that its venom would fall, drop by burning drop, onto him, without end. This was her cold counsel at last, made real. The one who had helped burn her father would lie in the dark beneath her mountains, and be dripped upon until the world itself ended. There is a small mercy in the scene, and it belongs to Loki's wife, Sigyn, who loved him. She sits beside him, holding a bowl to catch the venom before it lands. But even she has to empty it when it fills. And in those moments, when the drops strike him, Loki shudders so violently that the whole earth shakes with him. The Norse said that is what earthquakes are. To this day, when the ground trembles, it is Loki, flinching beneath Skadi's serpent. So let me ask you the question I have been circling since the first minute of this story. Skadi, the giant, the outsider, the bride who was chosen by mistake, the wife who could not make a marriage work. Was she really the one who lost here? Or was she, from the moment she took down her father's armour in that cold and quiet hall, the only person in this entire tale who ever truly won? Epilogue. What winter remembers. The truth behind the myth. Let us finally answer it. She left Asgard with a marriage instead of a corpse, and for 800 years people have told that as though it meant the gods had won, as though they had bought her off with a husband and a laugh and 2 pretty stars. But look at what she actually did. She refused to disappear into a god's house. She kept her own world, her own name, her own self. And she never, ever let go of the debt. She simply waited across marriages and centuries until she could pin the one who killed her father to a rock in the dark. The gods gave Skadi a laugh. She gave them nothing back. And she took everything else. That, I think, is why she still speaks to us. Strip away the eagles and the apples and the talking gods, and Skadi becomes something very recognizable. She is the person who walks into a room full of power, holding grief in both hands, and refuses to be managed. She is the one who will not trade herself for comfort, who would rather have the cold and the truth than the warmth and the lie. In a world that is forever telling people, women especially, to be smaller, to be easier, to just settle. Skadi is the goddess who looked at the settlement and kept her mountains. It is no wonder she has quietly become a favourite again in our own time. And notice what the cosy version of her story leaves out. The tidy telling gives you the funny feat and the sad divorce and stops. It leaves out that her name means harm. It leaves out that she may once have been so vast a figure that a whole part of the world, Scandinavia, may carry her name down to this day. It leaves out the wolf and the omen and the serpent. It sands her down into a charming anecdote. But the real Skadi is the giant who beat the gods at their own game and then outlasted them. And there is a reason the comfortable version keeps the darker one out of sight. Her story rhymes with others too, the way the deepest myths always do. That strange choice of a husband by his feet alone echoes down through other northern tales, of heroes and lovers who fall for a glimpse of an ankle through a doorway, a single foot beneath a curtain. Her marriage of the mountain goddess to the sea god has been set beside older spirits of forest and wild in neighbouring lands. And her father's eyes, thrown up to burn as stars, belong to one of the oldest human instincts there is. To take a grief too big to hold and put it in the sky, where at least it will shine. Some scholars even set her beside a shadowy god named Ullr, another master of skis and the bow, as though the North once imagined a whole divine household of winter hunters, and she was its queen. Others reach further still, to the forest spirits of the Finns and the Sami, the peoples who really did ski and hunt those inland wilds, and whom the Norse, from their coast, saw as strange and other, and a little frightening. It may be that in Skadi we are hearing a faint memory of them. The outsider on the mountain. The wild neighbour the settled world could never quite absorb, and so turned into a giant. So come back with me, one last time, to where we began. A woman on a mountain, in the falling snow, on her skis, with her bow. The wolves loud around her, and two particular stars burning overhead. She came down from that mountain once, in her father's armour, to make the gods pay. And when it was all over, the wedding, the laughter, the divorce, the long and patient revenge, she went back up. She gave away none of herself. Her name means harm, and in the end, the harm the gods did came home to roost. That is where I like to leave her. Not divorced, not defeated. Home. On her own terms, in her own winter, with every debt at last paid in full. If this story moved you, do the small things that keep this fire burning. Leave a like. Tell me down in the comments whether you are a mountain soul or a sea soul. And subscribe so you are here by the fire when the next story begins. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the top of Skadi's mountain. Until then, thank you for listening. Yours, Lady Mythos.